Hi, I'm Shaun Manning, writer of MacBeth, The Red King, and you are listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to a special edition of the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's May 10th, 2021. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. These podcasts are published to celebrate the exhibitors of this year's virtual edition of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. TCAF is an annual event gathering comic book creators from around the world to celebrate broad and diverse voices towards the betterment of the medium of comics through panels, keynote exclusives, and just basically enjoying the fun of comics. On this episode, I chat with Shaun Manning about MacBeth the Red King and Baxter and the Magic Towel at TCAF 2021. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Based in Michigan, Shaun is the author and co-creator of MacBeth the Red King and Baxter and the Magic Towel. He's also written for a variety of other works, including Star Wars Adventures, Garbage Pail Kids, and many more. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Shaun Manning at TCAF 2021. So, Shaun Manning, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate your time. What I normally do to start off the interview is ask the creator about their first comic book. So I'm wondering if you remember, what was the first comic book that you read?
Yeah, sure. It was Transformers #1 back when Marvel was publishing it in the 80s. It was kind of a funny thing. My mom had just started dating the guy who had become my stepdad, and he was very into like going to flea markets for coins and comics. Mm-hmm. And so I was along on one of these trips, and there was this booth in the back of the flea market with all these old comics. And I mean, it was probably the late 80s, early 90s when all this happened, but the Transformers series, this was already, well into back issues by then.
Right.
And so, yeah, I was super into Transformers at the time. And so I tried that as my comic, and ended up hunting down some more back issues after that. And yeah, kind of my earliest experiences with comics were like other kind of Marvel licensed books. Like I remember reading like Alf and Mad Balls and things like that. And I got into superheroes later, with I think it was when the X-Men cartoon was on.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so kind of broadened out from there.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of great influences, but I'm wondering who influences your work today.
There are a couple. I mean, there's the ones that I really just get excited about, like Grant Morrison is someone whose work I just love and try to emulate, and it's just their work is so smart and complex and also kind of weird, and and so I don't think what's odd is I do cite that as an influence. Like it's something, that feeling and that excitement is something that I really hope underlies my work, but so far, I don't think I've done anything that cerebral or experimental, but I'll get on that at some point. Yeah, other work that just really excites me is, I really like the sorts of things that Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey do. I was so excited to discover them when they were doing Phonogram, before Wicked and the Divine. Just so stylistic and fun, and just about music in a way that I found really fun. And then, of course, The Wicked and the Divine was just a whole experiential thing. Beyond the comics, Kieran and Jamie would hold these dance parties at Comic Con and stuff, and everyone's in costumes and dressed like gods. And and that's like another thing. It's like I couldn't pull that off. Like I don't think they influence me in a way that's like I want to do what they're doing, but I want to do I do hope that I can sometime do something that is as immersive or is immersive in that way that creates a community around it.
Or at the very least, they spark creativity. I mean, that's something, absolutely. Yeah. That's great. That's great. So we're here talking about the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and I'm wondering, do you have any special convention or festival moments that you'd like to share?
Oh, so many. Before I was making my my own comics, I was a staff writer for Comic Book Resources back in the Eisner-winning Jonah Weiland era, and so I would get to go to all of these conventions and have kind of special access to them. Going to panels and interviewing creators and actors and directors and such. And so I think that there are moments that, there are definitely experiences. I mean, I think like one of the things I always cite is I mean, it sounds funny to say, but because I was like working, this was a job of working Comic-Con, and I'd had a really hard day at San Diego Comic-Con. Like nothing was going right in my status, in my capacity as Comic-Con reporter. But that evening, a friend of mine, a colleague, and I went to the Veronica Mars movie launch party.
Oh, cool.
And it was just so brilliant. And we met, we got a picture with Enrico Colantoni, who played, Keith Mars. And it was just so delightful and such a great memory. And just something that really just was possibly made brighter by the fact that, it was the day before it was challenging. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think that beyond that one single experience, I found that, having done the Comic Cons and a number of different ones so far, I love the spectacle. I love just seeing everything and seeing everyone's costumes, and the vendor displays and the publisher displays, and meeting new people. But I mean, it is really like the personal aspect, the
right.
Seeing people I only see every so often, and hanging out and things like that just really are what I love about cons at this stage. But in Artist Alley, just meeting new people, like, coming up to the table and talking comics, and I'm usually sharing a booth with a friend, so we have very different things, and we can talk to whoever comes up to the booth about any number of things, and meet them, and maybe they like what they're doing, what we're doing, and maybe they don't, but it's still we can still have fun, have a good interaction either way.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Absolutely, it's that personal aspect. I firmly agree with you on that one. That's for sure. So let's talk about what you're exhibiting at TCAF this year. I know we have a number of books. Maybe you want to talk a bit about them.
Sure. Well, my big book is MacBeth, the Red King, that I worked on with artist Anna Vicek. Anna right now just had a new series coming out with Image called Home, and the writer on that is Julio Anta. And first issue just came out. It's great. I had nothing to do with that series, but I love Anna's work, and I'll follow her wherever she goes.
Sure.
But yeah, MacBeth is it is not based on the play. It's the first thing to know. It is historical fiction based on the real 11th century Scottish king, and in mine, he's the good guy. Or as good as you can be when you're an 11th century Scottish warlord. And I mean, what's fascinating about the story to me is that, I mean, based on what historical record we have, and there isn't much, he probably was a relatively good king. He ruled for about 15 years, which was, kind of hard to do in an era when people were just, killing the king is what you do on a Tuesday. But he did all these things. He and his wife had founded all of these monasteries. He at least believed himself to be a pious person. He traveled to Rome and gave out gold on the streets. He probably met with the Pope, and all of this stuff's in the book. But it's I started this book. I was in college, and I was in the production of Macbeth, and I was just a soldier who died over and over again. But I was talking to the dramaturgy students, and they said, they were just saying things like, yeah, everyone in this play, was a real person, except for Banquo and Fleance. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting because they're a pretty big part of the play. So I ended up doing some research and just discovering what a fascinating story this was. And so I wanted to tell that story, and I ended up I did my graduate degree in Glasgow, not directly related to this book, but in part so I could get there and
right.
things. But yeah, I'm super proud of the book, and yeah, it's done pretty well for me. The North American edition, which was published by Ontario's Lucha Comics and Shooting Star Press, has been up for a little bit. The UK European edition just came out earlier this year, and it was named one of the Scottish Book Trust's I think 10 most anticipated YA books of the year. So
wow, congratulations on that. That's great.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about that.
Sure.
And so yeah, I that's a book that I'm really happy that I got done, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. And I mean, I should say that it's not a scholarly book, and it's not primarily geared towards education, but it is designed so that it can be used that way. I took all the swears out from my initial script draft. But yeah, we want this to be able to be in schools and be taught, and either as companion to Shakespeare's play or as an entryway to Shakespeare, because it is so different. But maybe if you see these characters that you recognize it, but also it can be used as kind of a lesson in media literacy, because Shakespeare wrote his play basically as propaganda for King James, and to please the new king, and where I don't have that. So kind of looking at who tells history and why, I think would be a great topic for our current moment.
Oh, right. Exactly. Yes, for sure. But, so, yeah, it sounds like a fascinating book. Do you have any others that you're exhibiting at the show?
Yeah. Another one I did recently and was much, very, very different, is, excuse me. I did Baxter and the Magic Towel as a one shot with the artist is Esther Pimentel. And Baxter is about it's a mostly silent story about a dog who steals. The dog is a member of a family who has superpowers by virtue of basically a cape, but a magic towel that they tie around their shoulders. And so Baxter steals the cape of the boy in the family, the young boy in the family, and has adventures just flying around town, and while the family is trying to chase and catch him. And I don't know, yeah, it's a very it's a very sweet kind of simple story, and that was something that I was kind of inspired by a few years ago, my kiddo mishearing a lyric to a B-52 song, and combined with the dream I had about a dog driving a car.
Okay, sounds good.
So that's inspiration. But yeah, that's a fun little story that I've got at the show.
Great.
And this will be the first convention I've had that at.
Nice, good stuff. Want to switch gears a wee bit and ask, since you've been doing this for a while, wondering if you have any advice for someone who might be wanting to make their own comic book? What would you say to them?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the great thing about the moment we're in right now is that if you want to make comics, you can just do it. You don't need the backing of a Marvel or a DC to put out really good material and to have it be seen. And I think that that's something that we're really finding. The downside of that is that the more comics that are out there, the harder it can be to cut through and get your comics seen. But there are other you can work at that and be a self promoter. Never apologize for your work. Get your name out there. I mean, the tricky part is if you're like me and a writer who can't draw, then it is, especially with those newer formats that, if you're publishing on, say, Webtoon or Tapas, they do kind of, even though it's not a monthly comic, there is often kind of a content schedule so that people don't forget about you. And that can be hard too, especially if you're having to find an artist to work with and then, go back and forth between the script and the art. But yeah, I mean, my advice to writers would be find an artist, sort out between the two of you or more if, you're working with a colorist who's separate and things like that. But work out, what you hope to accomplish, how you're going to do it, who's responsible for what. And yeah, just make comics. Your first one might not be great. That's okay. Make bad comics. That's fine. But just, the more that you do the work and get your work out there, then I think the more traction you'll get, the better you'll get at your craft, the more people you'll meet, the more people you meet who can give you meaningful feedback. Because that's the other thing. I do think that feedback is really, really valuable when you can get it. I've been part of writing groups and things like that. And, like if you have a friend or a partner, then, maybe they'll be able to look, maybe they'll be willing to look at your work, but you should also think about their perspective and, are they just trying to make you feel good? And, do they know enough about what you're trying to do to give you feedback that's going to be helpful?
That's good advice. Good advice for sure. So we've talked about MacBeth, the Red King, and Baxter, but I'm wondering what's next for you. Can you talk about what you have coming down the pipe?
Sure. There's a few things that I'm working on right now. There is a few things that I'm shopping, and there's one thing that I'm hoping to get on Kickstarter later this year. It's pretty early going on that. I've just started working with a great artist, but that one is called Coal City, and that is kind of it's a story that's kind of inspired by a mix of like Fritz Lang's Metropolis and Final Fantasy VII and Upton Sinclair. And it's kind of a story of political thriller set in kind of a retro-futuristic setting. It's very, very stylized. One of the things that I'm playing with in it is propaganda as art. And, it's kind of unabashedly, kind of inspired by the early 20th century labor movements, but also adapting that into a fictionalized setting and bringing it forward into modern times. And I want to be make my perspective very, very clear that I'm promoting a specific view of the world, but also making it really good art, making it something that you want to consume and read and look at and think about. And it's also, I mean, the dialogue is very, one of the things I actually didn't intend to do it first, but kind of once I got into the world, it's kind of golden age of Hollywood style banter where it's a bit presentational, but it's it's just like call and response back and forth. It's like one line comes so naturally after the next. And so I'm really excited about that. And yeah, just the world that it's set in, it's the sort of thing where they have giant mechs, giant robots, but they don't have cell phones.
Okay.
So I'm playing with that sort of kind of retrofuturism, nebulous. When does this take place? Is it our world or is it not? But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that. And one of the things I'm thinking about, and this will depend on if something else happens with this series of shorts, but I also have the first chapter of a story that I'm doing in short 8-page chapters with Fernando Pinto, and that is called Giant Fighting Robots in Love. And it is it's pretty much just what it says on the tin. It's set in kind of a post-apocalyptic world at war, where there's these two powerful factions, and the two giant mechs on either side of the conflict fall in love, much to the dismay of their pilots. And so I'm thinking I'm going to present the 8-page stories as a backup feature in Coal City.
Oh, okay, cool.
But yeah.
Sounds good. Lots to look forward to, that's for sure. So naturally, we've been talking about Toronto Comic Arts Festival. One of the things that you do is you interact with people and ask questions, but the other thing you do is buy books.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, where do you recommend that people go to buy your books?
Sure. While you're at the Toronto Comic Art Festival, I do have an exhibitor presence where you can see 5 of my books. And I'm so excited to be doing TCAF this year. It's been a convention I've always wanted to do. I'm hoping next year I can do it in person. But
absolutely.
But sure, beyond the convention, you can find all of my stuff at ShaunManning.com. And I am also on Twitter at Faster Than Shaun.
Very good. Well, Shaun, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
That's a good question. No, I'm just I'm really grateful for the chance to exhibit. This is the first time I've done one of the virtual conventions. So that's something that I'm really excited about. And, one of the things that appealed to me about this, aside from being a convention that I've always wanted to do, is that, anything that you do choose to buy from the conference site, it all ships together. So it saves, it removes one of the barriers that I had found, when I'm just as a fan browsing some of the other online conventions. So I was really happy to see that, and I hope that folks will take advantage of that as they're browsing the Artist Alley.
Thanks to Shaun for the chat. You can discover more about Shaun on Twitter at Faster Than Shaun, that's SHUN, and online at ShaunManning.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.